During this video about Adobe Experience Design, we are going to start to work into the prototype area of Adobe XD. As we know, into the design area, we create the elements and the shapes that we interact with and that we animate into the prototype area. So you cannot work into the prototype area unless you have created something first into the design area. Of course, when you are into the prototype area and, for example, you have forgotten to create a specific rectangle that you need, you can always go back into the design area, create the rectangle, and go back into the prototype area. Before we start with the video, if you want to follow step by step what I do, and if you want to use the same files that I use, you should go to File and to Get UI Kits and download these two files, Auto, Animate, and also Interactive. This is because during this video I will do some examples with these two files. So let's go back to our tutorial file and let's now see the first differences between the design area and the prototype area. So when we click on prototype, we can see that we still have all of our artboards in the same way that we see them into the design area, and we also have still our plugins, our layers, and our assets. What we do not have into the prototype area is the vector tools and also the options to edit our vector shapes and elements. This is because into the prototype area we cannot create our vector elements and shapes. So the first thing that we are going to do is to do a preview of one of these artboards, and the first suggestion that I give you is always to check into the design area if you have all set to your preview. So, for example, we can go to this artboard and click on it and see if we have the scrolling and the hatch. This is because if we do not have the edge in the right position, we cannot do a scrolling that is right, and also if we do not have the vertical scrolling activated, we will only see, in this case, the page in this way. So, when we do activate the vertical scrolling and we create the hatch and we put it into the right position, we can have the right preview of our artboard. So, we will now see how to put the edge in the right way, in the right position. So, we can click on our file and use the guides to see the end of the page, what we think is the end of this artboard, and we can see from here that is 815. So we will only have to write on here on viewport height 815, and now we can see the hatch. Let's now try to click on preview, and we can see that we can do our scrolling just right. So you always should check if everything is set. Now we can close this preview, and of course we can see the preview both into the design and into the prototype area. Before we start to create the links and to use the animations of the prototype area, we will see how we can export our artboards and our elements from Adobe XD. So we will now go to the Auto Animate file, and we can go a little closer to one of the artboards, and we can now see how we can export our elements from XD. So we can click on the artboard and we can go to File and we can go to Export. We have now selected an artboard, so we can click on Selected and we can export our file from Adobe XD in a PDF format, but also in a JPG format, in a SVG format, and for this format we have more options. This is because, as we know, the SVG format is a vector format, and also in PNG. Let's try and export this artboard in a JPG, for example. So you can choose the quality, the size, and the folder that you want your file to go to. So we can click on export and go to our folder, and we can see the file exported as the same name as the artboard, and we can open it and we can see that we have only an image of the artboard. This is because this is a JPG file, and of course we cannot interact with it. Let's click on play and let's see the interaction of this artboard. We can see that if we click onto the artboard, we can have this animation. So, if you want to know if you can export just an element, for example, of an artboard, you can do it, and you just have to select the element that you want to export and click on Mark for Export. Let's mark for export also another element. We can click on the element and mark for export, and we can select both of these elements. So we can click on one element, click on Shift, and click on the other element, go to File, and go to Export, selected, and now we will try to export them in PNG. So we can click on Export, go to our folder, and we can see that it has named the file rectangle1 and rectangle/1. So we can open them, and we can see that we have only the element of our artboard, and also that we can export more elements in one action. So let's now try and export all of our artboards. So we can click on File, click on Export, and click on All Artboards. We will now export them in a PDF format, and now we can click on Export All Artboards. We can now go to our folder, and it has named the PDF XD Resources Auto Animate UI. We can click on it, and as we can see, we can have all of our artboard into one PDF. So we will now go back into our tutorial file and start to work into the prototype area of Adobe XD. We can now see how the links really work. So, as we know, we can interact with our elements into Adobe XD, and we can create links between artboards and also between elements. So, when you create a link, it means that when you are into the preview and you do an action that triggers the link, you will go from an artboard to another. So let's see this in practice. From the tutorial file, we can see that we have defined interactivity, and it will probably want us to create a link between these two artboards. We can see another difference between the prototype area and the design area. In fact, when we are into the design area, we can see that our artboard has this blue edge and the hatch, but when we are into the prototype area, the artboard is filled with this blue color. We have the edge and we have also this element. This element gives us the possibility to create links. So when we click on this element and we drag it, we can create a link. So we can drag it to this artboard, release the mouse, and we have now created a link. So we can see from here what type of link we have created. We have created a tab link. So this means that when we have the preview, we can of course always scroll, but if we tap on here, we will go to this artboard. So we can create this type of interactions with tap, drag, time, keys and gamepad, and also voice. We can also decide the type of actions, the destinations, and also the easing and the duration. So we have now created a tab link, and we can see that now we have this plus here. This means that we can have more interactions from the same artboard. Of course, we cannot have the same type of interaction with this artboard and another artboard that we have with this artboard and this artboard. This is because if we have the same type of interaction with tap, we will have a contrast, because if we tap, we interact with this artboard, and for example, this artboard, we cannot go to either of the artboards. In fact, if we try to create another link by clicking on plus, dragging this arrow from this artboard to this artboard, we can see that we do not have the tap option anymore. So let's try and select keys and gamepad. With keys and gamepad, we can choose from our keyboard, for example, a letter. So we can click on A, and now when we go to the preview, we can always scroll, we can always tap and go to this page, but we can also click on A and go to this artboard. So we have now created our first links with the same artboard, and we can see from this preview that when we are into this artboard or when we are into this artboard by clicking on A, we cannot go back to this first artboard. So we will now create a link from this Charts Details artboard to this Gante Collection artboard, so that we can go back to this artboard when we are here. So we can go to the design area and we can, for example, create an arrow. So we can create a triangle and we can rotate it. And now we can go back to the prototype area and we can create the link also from this element, but we will create it for this video only from the artboards. So we can click on the artboard and we can click on here and create the link. So right now this link is with keys and gamepad. We will create a tap link so that we can tap from here to go here. So we can click on preview, and when we click on this artboard and when we click again, we can go back from this artboard and this artboard. So another thing that we can do with the interaction options is to, for example, click on this artboard and this text and click on fix position when scrolling. When we do this and we go to the preview and we scroll through this artboard, we can see that these text remain in the same position. So this could be very useful, for example, with an image that stays in the same position while scrolling. So before we conclude with the video, I will now go to the files that we have downloaded to do some examples, so that we can see, for example, from the auto animate file, how a file with all of the links already set works. So we can, for example, go to this artboard, click on preview, and if we tap, we can see that we have this change of color. We can also see from here that this animation is just two artboards with the elements with different colors. So we can understand that the type of action is tap, but let's see here if we have a tap animation. Of course, if we click on the artboard, it will also say to us that it is tap. So, and we can see that we have the link tab to go to basics, to opacity, and also from opacity to basics. We have an auto animate type of action, an opacity destination, which is the name of the artboard. We have an easing out easing and also a duration of 0.4 seconds. So we can now go, for example, to the interactive UI, and we can see from prototype what kind of links we have. So we can go to Splash Artboard and we can see that we have a tab link from Splash to create account. Of course, we have the options to create other links. If we go to create account, we can see that we have from here a tab link to go back to the first artboard, and we have some links with the elements. Of course, we can create the same type of link. As we can see, we have for all of these links the tab link, but this works because these are not the two artboards connected. These are the elements of the artboards connected. So you can create, as I said, the same type of trigger between the elements of the artboards, but not between an artboard and another artboard. So if we click on here, we can see that almost every element leads to another artboard. For example, we can see these animations. Let's see here what we have. We have a tab link. Here we have a time link. So let's see how this works. For example, let's click on here. Let's click on preview. And I'm not clicking on anything, and it is doing an animation. This is because it is a time transition. In fact, we have the trigger as time, we have a 3 seconds delay, we have a transition type of action, we have the home site show to destination right now, and we have an animation that dissolves, as we can see when we wait for the animation to go. So you can see that when it changes, it dissolves, and we have an ease out easing and a duration of 0.4 seconds. So let's see these tab links. So we can click on preview, and it will show this hand when we are onto an element that leads us to something. So we can click on get started, and we are now into this artboard. We can go to login, and we are into this artboard. And now, in this case, I have a type animation. I'm not clicking anything. We already seen this, but we can also click on some of the elements. And for other elements, we have to wait because it is a time animation. So during this video, we have seen the basics of the prototype area of Adobe XD. So we have seen how to create links, how links work, and also what kind of links of actions we can create into XD between artboards and also elements. And we will see in the next videos more specifically how to use the elements and the tools for the prototype area. So this is all for this video. Thank you for watching this tutorial of Adobe Experience Design. If you have any questions, you can ask it in the comments. I invite you to see the other videos of this channel. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next video of Adobe Experience Design.